Welcome to LBMC's Cybersecurity Sense podcast. This week, we're going to be discussing the business email compromise, BEC for short, the attacks and ways that you can really build some resiliency against those. My name is Bill Dean. I am a senior manager here at LBMC Security. While I'm involved in many aspects of our security practice, I'm the lead for incident response, forensics, and litigation support practice. So let's start with a little bit of news that's going to be relevant, obviously, to the business email compromise. Of recent, there's been a few articles in the news, one from Security Ledger, another from Dark Reading. And, after reading these, it just reminds me of the Nigerian money scams that have been going on for decades. People ask, why in the world do they continue to use this same scam? Well, the answer is simple. It continues to work. And that's the same with the business email compromise. It's probably been going on for 4 or 5 years. So some highlights from the articles that will be in the show notes. This is a $5 billion industry. Why would they stop doing this if they're going to continue to make this much money? And the take is huge. The average loss for U.S. companies was about $140,000. They use a lot of different tactics, and we'll get into more of the details a little bit later, but they're using email spoofing from executives, and sometimes they'll use a mechanism that we see often called typo squatting. So for instance, if I'm going to spoof an email to lbmc.com from an executive, as I send it in from the outside, I'm going to change the L to a 1. And then it looks like lbmc.com, which seems to be a legitimate email. So that's typo squatting. A little more detail on what that is will be in the show notes. And then what we've seen of recent, in a case we've actually just finished up here at LBMC Security, is they actually compromise credentials, both from the executives requesting the financial transaction and even an email administrator that could use to set up auto forward rules and send on behalf of for other people. Just a genius way to approach this from an attacker's perspective. Some stats, more than 70% of the spoofed and the business email compromise emails were found to come from attention-grabbing subjects like payment, request, urgent, and these weren't just from big executives from big companies. 15% of this went after small to medium-sized companies. And in addition to the subject lines, as we'll talk about a little bit later, they actually will get into the email systems or find the flow or the system in which these transactions occur, and they find the verbiage that's used, the way the request is made, and they emulate that to be as close as possible. So the articles from Security Ledger and Dark Reading came out after a public service announcement from the FBI, which is, handling a lot of these business email compromise attacks. Overall, since 2015, there's been a 1,300% increase in these attacks. Again, they're going to keep doing it because it's successful. And with an average take of $140,000, that's a pretty successful attack. It's been reported in all 50 states. From October 2013 until May of 2016, more than 15,500 reports in the United States alone. That's almost $1 billion in reported loss. And I want to emphasize the term reported loss. These are just the companies that have reported it to the FBI. We've been involved in numerous organizations that didn't even report it. So you can assume that this number is actually much higher. So an overview as to, kind of what this is. I remember probably when I worked one of my first compromises as an incident responder from a consultant perspective was probably in about 2008, late 2008, maybe early 2009. And we had numerous of these. And what was happening, it was the ACH fraud, in which the adversaries would use malware such as Zeus or Zbot or Citadel to get on the machines of the CFO or whoever handles the online financial transactions. They would steal their credentials, log in, and then perform their own transactions. Well, that's kind of went to the wayside now. Business email compromise is what they're doing. We're not seeing the malware compromises anymore to just do the transaction. We're seeing it, but it's to compromise the email accounts to create a legitimate, what seems to be a legitimate financial transaction. So we've kind of touched on it, but who is the target for this type of an attack? You. Everyone is a target. If you conduct financial transactions and you have money, you're going to be a target. And the time spent on this is somewhat impressive because they have to perform extensive reconnaissance. They have to know the company. They have to know who the vendors are. They have to know the interactions if they're sister companies or who they're doing business with. They're going to know the organization. They're going to use the social media such as obviously LinkedIn and some other aspects to figure out what is the chain of command. Who would be making these requests and who do we need to specifically target? Then finally, social engineering is a crucial role in this. Whether it's a spoofed email address or whether it's from within the email system itself, you're going to have to impersonate someone else with authority to create the transaction. And it's so impressive as to how much they understand the system when we get involved with these. So to get the credentials, sometimes they'll use the same types of attacks that we use in our phishing assessments. We will send in phishing emails with a link, trying to convince the user to enter their credentials into a portal of some sort. And we're pretty successful in doing that. And so are the bad guys. If they're using this to get the credentials that they need to get into. And we'll talk specifically about the platforms that they're targeting in a little bit. So, once they're in, they can spend weeks, months studying the vendors, the billing systems, the executive style of communication when they make these requests. And sometimes, most important, their travel schedule. They know when they're going to be out of the office, which is a key time for the attack. So when the time is right, when they're gone, they're sick, they're not in the office, they're going to send a bogus email from that executive to a targeted employee that they will normally communicate with to perform an ACH transfer or to request some type of sensitive information of financial value. And so once it's made, there's the wire transfer. Once it starts, that trust is already there because they spoofed or they've impersonated the executive through different means. Again, it's a valid email or maybe it's a spoofed email. So, another instance that we saw that we just finished was they actually compromised one of the email administrators' account. And with that, with everyone that's involved in the transaction, they could set it up to where there's auto forward rules that were going outside to see what's going on. It was just impressive the time and effort that went into this. So through this, there's a lot of different scenarios. The three main ones that we're seeing with organizations are it's a business working with a foreign supplier, or it's an executive that wants to receive or initiate a wire transfer. This is probably one of the more popular ones. One that we've also seen quite a bit is that they may be requesting, maybe it's the executive, or maybe it's an attorney, or maybe it's an outside source with an authoritative, approach to request very sensitive information, such as, wage information, W-2 information, even personally identifiable information for employees. This picked up a lot of steam in 2016, in which they would take that information and probably do some fraudulent tax returns, do something like that, or other types of identity theft that the shelf life of that information is so long. So that's a brief overview as to how dangerous that this attack is to your organization. So let's talk about some of the protections that you can kind of put into place. Web accessible email is increasingly becoming a target. Whether it was Outlook Web Access, where we're seeing a lot of it now is Outlook 365, because lots of organizations, both large and small, are migrating everything there. So with that, that's another attack vector in which you can log directly into someone's email account using a web interface. So there's some specific things you can do with Outlook 365 to really combat this. If you're using other online, web providers, I'm sure that they may have some similar types of protections, but let's focus on Outlook 365. First and foremost, for email, any type of remote access into your network, multi-factor authentication is for the email, for the high risk and C-levels and the IT admins. That's a must. If you're going to log into the web portal to get email, it needs to be multi-factor. In the show notes, I will provide a link to show you exactly how to set this up. If you just put that one thing in place, your resiliency against this type of attack is much greater than what it is without it. Something else that you can do is that for emails that are external, you can tag the subject line to say bracket external, meaning why would the CEO be sending me an email requesting some type of ACH transfer that looks to be valid, but it's coming from an external source? You can do this. And so when you implement that, communicate with your users. We're implementing this change to try to reduce spoofing, and understand if when you see that you may need to take additional measures or think about it a little bit more before you open the link or before you respond to that request. Stop and think, there's a reason why we're putting that there. Configure alerting for Outlook 365. So by default, the infrastructure does have monitoring and alerting. So what you can do is set up different types of things that will alert you if something happens. If someone's trying to send a message, send as, or send on behalf as, or mailbox logins. If you're remotely from the web access, you want to kind of log that information to where you can see if someone may be logging in from foreign countries. Something to keep in mind is that by default, mailbox auditing for Outlook 365 is not turned on. So I recommend you turn that on, especially for your C-levels and those that would be targeted in this type of an attack. In the show notes, I'll provide that link. So those are some very good ways that you can definitely combat this and build your resiliency. Number one on the list, multi-factor. And this is across the board. VPNs, any type of remote access into your network really needs to have multi-factor to build some resiliency, but it's going to help a great deal with the business email compromise attack. So that's a brief summary of that. So most of this information will be in the show notes. As usual, want to cover some upcoming speaking engagements. I will be speaking on ransomware and the evolution of ransomware at the C-Scale conference in Baltimore on August 7th. I'm also going to be in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to participate in the Penn Business Journal sponsored roundtable event that focuses on insider threats, and that's going to be on August 16th. The irony of this is that we were supposed to do this roundtable in early July, but I actually had to testify in federal court regarding an insider threat that allegedly was stealing information. So they didn't have an issue moving it, based on the expertise that we're going to gain from that. So as we're going to talk about in the future, we do a lot of the insider threat investigations, and we do a lot of testimony involving that. I am going to be speaking at the TSCPA Healthcare Conference. It's going to be in Nashville on October 6th. I'm not real certain what the topic is going to be at this point, but I can assure you it's going to be great. Mark Burnett, a shareholder here at LBMC, is going to be giving his Dear President Trump, Top Ways to Secure the U.S. talk at the InfoSec Nashville conference on September 19th. There's going to be more details in the show notes on that. So in closing, thank you for listening. As of right now, next week I plan to discuss the devastation of insider threats to an organization. And I don't mean those that are accidentally clicking on links or making a mistake. I'm going to refer specifically to the people that have intent to take information from you and to compete with you in the future. To learn more about LBMC Security and the services we provide, please visit lbmcsecurity.com. Thank you.